Well, it's great to be in Kansas again. Well, I mean, again, I've never been here before, but I've really enjoyed the time I spent here doing the same thing I'm going to do tonight all day, talking about plants, walking around Powell Gardens with a fellow named Matt Bunch and fellow plant geek, and what a great asset you have here, although I understand that's Missouri, another state. I don't know whether you guys have a rivalry between, is there? No rivalry between Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, this is like an unknown part of the world to me. I feel like I'm coming through in a covered wagon or something like that. And it's been great. My flights were insane yesterday getting here and trying to find a place to eat at 10:30 at night, but it worked out good. And I'm going to talk about woodland plants. Not necessarily, they're all native plants, native to the U.S., east of the Rockies. A lot of them, to my surprise, after talking to Matt today, are native here. And everything I discussed with him grows well here. And I know that for a fact because I've been selling plants to garden centers and to private individuals in this area for quite some time. And in fact, is it Melina? Melia looked over my handout. Does everybody have a handout? Looked over my handout and went down, oh, I grow this, I grow this, I grow this, I know this, I grow this. I was really surprised because there's hopefully a lot of stuff that you don't know and that you'll learn about tonight. And I hope you do walk away learning something good, and that if you enjoyed my talk and learned something, that you'll take the time to go to greatgardenspeakers.com and give me a 5-star rating. Information on how to do that's on page 3. There's a commercial plug. And I'll reward your time by sending you a Trillium cuneatum in the mail in a nice little padded envelope wrapped in moss. You'll also see here a mailing list form. I put out a somewhat educational mailing every once in a while, and I'd love to have you on my mailing list. And even if you already are on my mailing list, fill this form out because we're going to pick 3 people, and they will have their choice of one of these 3 books by my friend Amy Stewart. And if you haven't heard of these books, you're missing some amazing stuff. Has anybody heard of Amy Stewart? Yeah. Okay. Well, the first one is Wicked Plants. And it's got some incredible stories about why and how of things like poison ivy, how it works and how to watch out for it, and lots of other great plants like the mechanisms of stinging nettle and things like that. Fascinating read. I'm not a great reader, but when I first got this book, I read religiously a chapter every night till I finished it. Another book that she wrote, which I didn't think would be very interesting, which turned out to be a fascinating read, is Flower Confidential, and it's a story about how the cut flower business evolved in the United States. So, to follow up with Wicked Plants, the most logical thing for Amy to do is follow up with Wicked Bugs. Another fascinating read. So make sure that you print legibly on the mailing list form, and you may be a lucky winner here.
The most recent one, which is Drunken Botanist.
Drunken Botanist.
That's fabulous.
Yes. So anyway, I thank you, Malia, for the coffee. I told Lika that if I didn't have a cup of coffee at 5:45, I'd be on the floor. I may still be on the floor, but at least I'll have some caffeine in my system. So, can we dim the lights a little, please? I see a few of you guys sipping beers. Anybody gets out of hand, they're going to get out. They're going to be out of here. Hope you're all old enough to drink. Jeez. I moved to West Virginia in 1972 because growing up in Philadelphia, I don't know if any of you all are familiar with Philadelphia. See, that was West Virginia. Y'all means you all. It's kind of a contraction. It's not in Webster's dictionary, but it's in the Urban Dictionary. So if any of you all know about Philadelphia, who's been to Philadelphia? Wow, you guys are well traveled. So you already know that Philadelphia is a mecca of horticulture. I grew up in a city. What are you laughing at? The rocket scientist, he's laughing. He really is a rocket scientist. And that guy's a brain surgeon back there. I grew up in Philadelphia in the 60s, cutting high school and hitchhiking to Longwood Gardens, Scott Arboretum, Winter, Tyler Arboretum, Morris Arboretum. Philadelphia is a mecca of horticulture on the East Coast. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the world. And back then, still, you know, plant people are very sharing with information and cutting, stuff like that. And I ended up, when I was just a teenager, with some incredible plants and the knowledge of how to grow them. So the garden at my mother's row house in Philadelphia was almost as big as this little platform here, and obviously it wasn't big enough for me. So I read this ad in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Somebody was selling 58 acres for $6,000. I thought they must have left a digit off somewhere, but it was true. I thought it was only 4 hours from Philadelphia, so I piled my 3 dogs into my orange 1961 Volkswagen van with the flowers on it, and drove and just kept driving and driving. But when I got there, this is what I saw. So even though it was 8 hours from my family, my friends, everything I grew up with and knew, who could pass that up? The views are quite breathtaking. It's not as flat here as I thought. I mean, I pictured this, I pictured it as a desert out here, you know, with the sagebrush, you know, being burned on by the tornadoes and everything. When I made my reservations at the Marriott, I said, do you guys have tornadoes out here? He said, do we have tornadoes? Of course. I said, have you ever seen one? He said, sure. I said, well, do you think one's going to hit the Marriott? He said, don't worry about it, we have a basement. So I asked him when tornado season was over, and he said August. So I already made my flight reservations, everything, so I'm here. Anyway, West Virginia isn't flat, but if you lay West Virginia out flat, it's bigger than Texas. Well, my own farm, my house is at 2,800 feet, and my top field is 3,600, and it's not very far to get up that way. We have such an incredible diversity of species of trees in the woods: maples, oaks, beeches, birches, walnuts, butternuts, sassafras, locust, that we beat the hell out of New England for fall color. You know how everybody raves about the fall color in New England? Forget it. We have New England beat. And that's where I live. And that's my 1971 GMC 3/4 ton snowplow with chains on all 4 wheels. And there's been times, 2009, I couldn't even push the snow anymore. I'd have my friend Dave Johnson come up. And if you don't believe me, it's on my Facebook page. I have a video of him coming up 3 times that winter to remove the snow because I had nowhere else to put it. 195 inches, which is great because you can't get a better winter mulch. And it's pretty damn reliable. We have virtually no brown winters. So even though I'm zone 5, now the new maps say zone 6, I can push it and grow zone 7 plants. We don't have the heat and humidity that I think you have out here. And there's always a gentle breeze, sometimes 40, 50 miles an hour. One of the biggest complaints I get about my talks on the evaluation forms is too technical, too much botanical nomenclature. And Alika said, I don't have to dumb it down because y'all are pretty smart. There's a y'all again, West Virginia. I say crick instead of creek. What do you say out here? Creek? Yeah, I figured that. So what do you want? You know, how about if we do a combination of botanical nomenclature and common names? That'll make everybody happy, okay? And one of the biggest complaints about botanical nomenclature is the fact that it's constantly changing. So one of the previous reasons that primarily that botanical names change was in the code of nomenclature that Linnaeus set forth back in the 1700s, was if a herbarium specimen was discovered that was previous to the currently used name, it would revert back to the older name. Now, with the mapping of plant genomes and DNA and electron microscopes, they're discovering that a lot of the familiar relationships that were thought to be before, you know, most of botanical nomenclature is based on floral structure. Now that we have DNA, it's opened up a whole new avenue of more plant name changes. And a lot of things get changed and then they get changed back. My rule is, when I run out, being a commercial nurseryman, when I run out of color tags with the old name, I switch to the new name. I just switched from an Eminella thalictroides to Thalictrum thalictroides, which I think should have been the case in the first place because everybody knew it was a Thalictrum, but somebody named it an Eminella. They thought that was the oldest name. Does anybody know that plant? Rue anemone is the common name. I don't think it's in here, but it's a very delightful, charming little member of the Ranunculaceae family, which is my favorite family, not just because Hellebores are in it, but peonies now have their own family, Peonaceae. And everything's ending up on a family level. Alliums used to be in the lily family, now there's Alliaceae. Trilliums used to be in the lily family, now there's Trilliaceae. So I think we're going to end up with a lot of genera becoming families, so stay tuned or take a course in taxonomy. Do they have a taxonomy course here, Leica? Okay, it's a fascinating field. And the reason I thought of that was this slide. See, these pictures trigger all these thoughts. That used to be Houstonia cerulean, very charming little plant. And it's now Hediotis cerulean. And this is kind of a difficult plant to grow unless you can really replicate the conditions it grows naturally in. When I was in Arkansas to give that talk, I visited a woman's garden and her entire lawn was covered with a white form of this. I'd never seen a white form before. And we dug up about 30 or 40 of them and I took them back with me on the plane and I couldn't get them to live. They typically grow in moist river bottoms where it floods occasionally, sandy soil, sandy, wet but well drained. Quaker ladies and bluets are the common names, but there's another species in this genus called Purpurea. There's several other species in the genus, and Purpurea doesn't have the blue flowers, and everybody's crazy about blue, but it has these charming little white flowers that age to a pink. It's very easy to grow, makes a neat ground cover, and it will seed around. One of the earliest plants, and I always think, well, maybe I should just do this chronologically by order of bloom, but that's too much trouble. So, Bloodroot. Is Bloodroot native here? And I'm going to ask you, it is? Okay, good, good. Sanguinaria canadensis, there's an easy Latin lesson for you, and what a better way to impress your friends by spitting out botanical nomenclature at the cocktail parties. They'll think you're really smart. I walk people around my garden, they scratch their heads. Is he real? I mean, throwing out all these Latin names. I could be making stuff up. But you can follow along. These are real. Sanguinaria, sanguine, red, blood. I mean, there's your bloodroot. It's in the poppy family. It's a very easy plant to grow. It's a very easy plant to propagate. And if you come to my workshop tomorrow, Leica didn't tell you, but everybody is going to go home with trilliums, bloodroot, dodecathion, what else did I send? Smilacina, all kinds of cool plants. Bottles, they're going to go home with an unopened bottle of Dip and Grow, an unopened bottle of Rootone, flats and plants, and they're going to go home with tissue cultured plants, a lot of really cool stuff. So see Leica for details about the workshop. And the bloodroot is real easy to propagate by just snapping the rhizome because the rhizome is covered with dormant buds, as is a Trillium rhizome. You can just snap it off. And it's easy to grow from the little small brownish seeds that form in a little pod. And this is one of the coolest plants that I remember walking in the woods, seeing when I was a kid. Discovering it for the first time was just one of those really exciting things. I mean, wow, what a strange plant. So it inspired me. And don't get me wrong, I don't like the term expert because it kind of makes it difficult to make a mistake, which I do quite frequently, but it's easy to get attracted to certain species or certain families of plants, and Irasemas are incredible. I grow about 30 different Irasema species. So native plant expert, well, I grow stuff from all over the world. And Irasema Tryfilum is our native Irasema, one of our natives. Is it native here? And how about Dracontium, Irasema dracontium? Tryfilum is the three-leafed one. Dracontium, common name is green dragon. It has 5 leaves, and it gets up about that tall. Tryfilum, I've seen Tryfilum get that tall in a rich, moist hollow. You do have some rich, moist hollows here, or as we say in West Virginia, hollers. Yeah. And it's real easy to grow from seed. And it's got a strange sex life that I can't even begin to tell you about here. Yeah, you'll have to read about that. But if you're lucky, they'll form a cluster of green seeds that turn to a brilliant red. And all you have to do is, under running water in a colander, macerate the pulp off, because there's dormancy inhibitors in the pulp. You know, a lot of seeds have to run through an animal before they can be germinated, so you can break that cycle. We have all kinds of tricks in the trade, like acid scarification or treatment with gibberellic acid to make seeds germinate, or with some leguminaceae seeds, we even put them in a bottle of sand, sharp sand, and shake them around till you crack the seed coat, which nature does over a period of a couple of years sometimes by freezing and thawing till a fissure opens up in the coat. Well, you can fool Mother Nature sometimes. And another way is to take an emery board and you have to know which end the cotyledon will emerge from, and just rub that on the emery board and kind of cheat Mother Nature. When we get to this one particular plant, I'll show you another great way. Mother Nature thought she fooled me, but I got her back. Erythronium americanum, native here? How about albitum, the white one? The white one, not the yellow? Just the white. Just the white. And see, the white one isn't native where I am. Trout lily, because of the speckled foliage. Adder's tongue. I don't understand where that reference comes in. Something about a snake. Has anybody seen anything that resembles anything about a snake? No, me either. Dogtooth violet. In fact, what?
I was going to say, maybe because the bloom opens so big to open its mouth? No?
Anybody buy that? Me either. But it was a good guess. Don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. There's a West Coast species, Erythronium dense canis. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket science. Dense canis, dogtooth, so maybe that's where we get the common name of this. Don't get me wrong, I love common names. You know, there's some kind of magic romance and folklore about common names. I remember the first time I discovered this plant was when I moved to West Virginia, and I was walking in the woods and I said, wow, this looks like some kind of house plant growing wild. Doesn't it look like some kind of peperomia or some little variegated house plant? But it's not. It's a native plant, and it's an orchid. Now in West Virginia, we have 20-something species of native orchids, and this is one of them. Now, you're not going to make a prom corsage out of the flowers of a native plant, unless you're getting into the lady slippers, maybe. But that's the flowers of Goodyear pubescens. And you can also grow it in a terrarium, makes a super little terrarium plant, as does Michella repens, partridgeberry, and sedum ternatum, make really neat little terrarium plants. I live in the northernmost range of this plant, Disporum maculatum, and you may have Disporum lanuginosum here. And I'm trying to think of the common name, nodding marybells or something like that. And it's hard to see in the slide, but can anybody see the little chocolate speckles on the flowers? Creamy flowers with chocolate speckles, great foliage that persists all summer, and big orange berries with seeds that are very easy to grow. I was telling a couple people earlier that in West Virginia, we have 128 different species of carex, 2 different species of luzula, and over 100 members of the Poaceae family, grasses, sedges, and grass-like plants, rushes. This is a really neat little rush. And who here likes to mow their lawn? You crazy? You must have a riding mower with air conditioning and headphones. And very relaxing. Is it? I can think of better ways than polluting the air and listening to that 30 decibels of 18 horsepower. You're already hard of hearing? I have ear protection. Okay, all right. I can think of better things to do than mow the lawn. So, and especially everybody, has these shady gardens people I know, they have these shady gardens and they want a lawn in deep shade with poor soil, and they keep sowing K31 fescue and wondering why nothing grows, you know, and they have big bare patches or some kind of fungus and they're waiting for a golf course. Forget it. Luzula multiflora, a really neat little rush, wood rush. I mean, even if it didn't have those cool flowers that last for weeks, it's a nice, tight little clump, only about that tall. And if you don't have a lot of money and you have a lot of lawn, if you have a lawn the size of this room, you may need thousands of them. If you don't have the money to buy them, just plug them in like maybe a foot apart, and then every 6 or 8 weeks, dig them up, divide them, you get about 6 new plants, and then replant them, and they'll make another nice clump. Before you know it, you'll be able to walk on. It's really cool to walk on barefoot, too. Better than AstroTurf. So that's one option that you have. Another option that is one of my favorites, and I don't have any pictures of it, it's called Carex appalachica. And it has the texture of angel hair pasta. And especially if you have a somewhat dryish hillside, to plant that and just have it weep down, because it's almost prostrate the way it lays on the ground, and the fine texture just, it looks like moving water on a hillside. And again, they're easy to dig up and divide and make new ones, plug them back in. Another one is Carex laxicomis, and this is a perfect native alternative to liriope. They use liriope overused out here. Well, Carex laxicomis really looks like liriope, and it's a native sedge. And again, it's easy to dig up, divide, replant, and before you know it, if you want something a little taller to have than the Luzula multiflora, or if you want a little more height, maybe about like that, and you want something with a little more movement, a little more texture, Carex woodii it's about twice as thick as Appalachica, another fantastically easy to grow Carex. And these are, not only are they beautiful, but they're no maintenance. No mowing, no watering, no fertilizing, nothing. And of course, if you do fertilize them a little bit, feed them, and do give them a little extra water when it gets really bone dry, they'll even perform better. And one more in the Poaceae family, Danthonia spicata. Common name is poverty oats. And this grows on my farm in the poor soil, in deep shade, and it produces a green carpet that looks like a lawn, which never has to be mowed. Where are you going? Oh, okay. Anybody have a pen to lend this gentleman? He's the rocket scientist, and he couldn't even remember to bring a pen. Blue cohosh. I have no idea where some of the common names come from. I'm sure if I did research, well, actually, I'm still trying to find out who Joe Pye was, but we'll get to that later. People keep sending me emails. Nobody seems to agree on it, so I still haven't heard any definitive. The latest is he was a Native American.
Aren't different regions have different common names too, which makes it even more difficult?
Yes, yes.
So
But Virginia bluebells are Virginia bluebells even outside of Virginia, you know. Blue cohosh, I have no idea what cohosh is. There's black cohosh and blue cohosh. I'm sure I could find an answer if I had the time, but I don't. This is a member of the Berbedaceae family, same family as Mayapples, which I think grow out here, Mayapples. And another great Mayapple relative, which I don't have a picture of in here, is something called Diphyllea simosa, which is only native to the mountains of North Carolina, but grows here and everywhere else, and I'm growing it. And its common name is umbrella leaf, and it gets up like this. I mean, it's like a Mayapple on steroids, and it has beautiful, undulated edges and white flowers up where you can see them that turn into black berries. Very, very interesting plant. Easy to grow from seed, as is this. This has a 2-year germination cycle for seeds. And when I get to the Actia pachypoda, which is now, Simicifuga racemosa, which is now Actia racemosa, still in the Ranunculaceae family. I'll tell you more about fooling Mother Nature. But you could do it with this too. Easy to grow from seed. The seed is a great wildlife attractor. I'm not talking about deer, which we refer to in West Virginia as rats on stilts. But this plant in the Berberdaceae family is being investigated along with several other plants in the Berberdaceae family for alkaloids like berberine, which has anti-tumor properties. They're finally getting smart and trying to outwit the drug companies that spend $5 million or $500 million developing new drugs that have worse side effects than the thing that they're supposed to cure. But don't get me started. Now this has beautiful foliage all summer and in somewhat, I don't want to say inconsequential flowers, but they're certainly not peonies or irises. But it has very attractive flowers. But the beautiful part of it to me is the berries that persist all summer and fall until the wild turkeys and grouse get them. But the foliage slowly turns a soft pastel yellow. And the combination of those blueberries on the pastel yellow is a great combination. So you gotta look for more things than just flowers or foliage and stuff like that. Combinations. Silene virginica. And there was something about this that I thought the common name was fire pink. Oh yeah, that's it, fire pink. And I always thought it was fire pink because of the color, reddish pink kind of, but it's not. You know why it's a pink? Because of that little notch. You know what pinking shears are? It's because of that little notch. So there's lots of reasons for common names that people don't even know or understand. And a good flora, and in West Virginia we have a good flora, which is about to be revised. It's 1,089 pages. It was last revised in 1976 by Earl Core and P.D. Strasbaugh. It's used by all surrounding states as a Bible. 1,089 pages, 3 inches thick. It treats over 2,500 species. And it goes into why this genus, why this species, and why the common name. Who wouldn't love lady slippers? Now this is the easiest lady slipper there is to grow, but it's the rarest to find, and if you find it, you should just leave it where it's at. But my friend Bill Steele in Beauvais, Minnesota at Spangle Labs has been raising tissue in tissue culture in vitro from seed lady slippers for the last 40 or 50 years and sells them at very reasonable prices. Not just our native Calceolus parviflora, reginae, but Macrantha, Kentuckiensis, and a lot of the non-native ones, and sells them at very reasonable prices. So if anybody's interested, send me an email that just says lady slippers, and I'll carbon bill, and you'll have his address. Like I said, these are very easy to grow. The pink ones are abundant. Are there any lady slippers native out here? No? The pink ones are easy to grow, but impossible to grow, but easy to find. The yellow ones are difficult to find, but easy to grow. So go figure that one out. And what a great sight in the spring. The flowers persist for quite some time. They produce literally millions of dust-like seeds. And like maybe 1 in a million will germinate in nature, be hiding somewhere for years and years till it becomes a flowering plant. Another native orchid, Aplectrum hymale. And I like to call this the first superglue. The common name is puddy root. Another common name is Adam and Eve orchid. Adam and Eve orchid because the new bulb, it produces a new bulb every year from a little rib-like structure, kind of like that Bible fairy tale about Adam's rib, you know, that, remember the Spencer Tracy movie, Adam's rib? Okay. Aplectrum hymale. The Native Americans used to crush the tubers and mend their pottery with it. That's where the name puddy root comes from. And hymale in Latin means winter. And the reason it's Aplectrum hymale is the only time the leaf is there is during the winter, early winter and late spring. It produces this 7 to 10 inch long, 3 to 4 inch wide, corrugated, pleated silver leaf that's just magnificent. When the leaf disappears, it's gone for maybe a month, and all of a sudden, if you're lucky, you'll get this pencil thick stem, 12 to 24 inches high with these really cool flowers on it. Here's another native orchid that's easy to grow, and I'm sure there's probably a couple species of spiranthes out here. Spiranthes, because the flowers spiral around the stem, and you'll see that better in the next image. The name of this particular plant is Spiranthe cernua odorata chatsford. The genus Spiranthes because the flowers spiral around the stem, cernua because the individual florets are nodding, odorata because this is a particularly fragrant form of the species, and chatsford because in 1957, Dick Ryan from the Delaware Valley Orchid Society discovered a superior clone of this plant growing in a wet ditch in Bear, Delaware, and dug it up, brought it home, and started sharing it with other members of the Delaware Valley Orchid Society. Well, for decades, people grew this plant and forgot that it was a terrestrial orchid. They passed it around as a houseplant. And it's so amazingly easy to propagate because if you put a single plant in a 4-inch pot, in a few months, you'll have a dozen new plants. And it's so cool because the roots curl up to the top of the soil and produce a new plant at the top of the soil, and you can just snap them off and repot them. They really are fragrant. They smell like vanilla extract. They're typically bog plants, so they like good wet soil. You see the spiraling? Can you smell that vanilla? Here's a plant that I had to go to England to appreciate, a native plant that I had to go to England to appreciate. On my last lecture trip, well, this was actually in the 90s, I went to England to give some lectures. And I went to visit my friend John Carter at Rowden Gardens, Brenton, near Tavistock in south of England. And when I got there, it was in the fall, and the whole back fence of his nursery looked like it was on fire with purples and golds and yellows. And I said, whoa, what is that? And he just started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? He said, let's take a walk up there. And I got up there and I looked at it and I said, it was Xantha rhiza simplicissima. Xantha means yellow in Latin, rhiza, root, rhizome, simplicissima because of the way the foliage is cut. Yellow root, the only woody member of the Ranunculaceae family that I know. And this was a real kick in the ass for me that, wow, I need to pay more attention to my plants because I never looked at this plant in the fall. I never noticed it, how beautiful the fall color was of this plant. And it's kind of an understory plant. It only gets about that tall. It has somewhat inconsequential flowers, kind of like Thalictrum dioicum-like, and the seeds are Thalictrum-like. In the midsummer, it starts producing its seed. But it produces new plantlets by rhizome. The rhizome sends out runners, and they're real easy to propagate that way. Are there any native trilliums out here? Certainly the prairie trillium must be out here. Is this considered the prairie out here? We're what to? To what? The what? The eastern deciduous forest and the prairies meet here? Interesting. So does anybody know if there's any native trillium species? I would think the prairie trillium might be native out here, Trillium recurvatum. Well, trilliums are very easy to grow. I had a question about soil pH out here. What's the average soil pH in your gardens? 7.4, that's sweet. There's no, what about in the woods? Is it more acidy in the woods? Like 5 or 6? No? In the woods, in the deciduous woods?
6.5.
6? No kidding. How about in like pine, do you have any pine forests down here? No hemlocks? No? Huh. It was like I gave a talk at the Old Brick Botanic Garden up in Madison, Wisconsin. I went visiting nurseries there, and every nursery had this like hazardous building shed somewhere with drums of hydrochloric acid in it. I said, what is this all about? And I said, well, we have to bring the pH of the water down from 9 or 10 down to 7. So they proportionally inject acid into the water. So,
Air water's like 8.2.
no kidding. What's rainfall here?
36.
No, I mean the pH of rainfall.
Oh, I don't know, but we have a limestone base, and we have a lot of artesian wells and runoff, and it just percolates through that limestone.
Sweet water.
And the tap water comes from the Missouri River, which they clarify by adding alum. takes the pH up to about 9.5 tap water.
Wow. What is it before they add the alum?
Probably down around 7, we'll call it mud.
Oh, we're fortunate. I have a sandstone well, 826 foot deep and pH of 7, but the soil in the woods is between 4.5 and 6. So, but you know, it's interesting because plants can tolerate such an incredibly wide range. I mean, obviously with everything there's a pinhead of perfect, but most plants that I've found have such a wide range on either end of that they can tolerate it. For example, Hellebores, which are my bread and butter, Lenten roses. Does everybody grow Hellebores out here? Yeah.
Not like the average gardener does it.
No. Well, yeah, I guess in some, I mean, I've been growing them for decades when they were still a cult plant.
If I put it on a picture on my Facebook page, people don't know what it is.
We'll have to change that. I have 6 acres of Hellebores. And they're growing in acid woods. And typically, Hellebores grow on limestone cliffs in meadows. I mean, they're not even a woodland plant. They're a meadow forb type plant. And yeah, they're a shade plant only because they grow in meadows and the meadow grasses and forbs grow up and protect them. In the early spring, when they're unprotected, the sun isn't that strong. But as the season progresses, the grasses and forbs and all the meadow plants grow up and kind of screen the sun for them. Plus, like I said, they're growing in 7 to 8.5 pH. And I'm growing them in 4.5, and they're lush and thick. So there's a perfect example of a wide tolerance. And I'm growing them in deep shade from the beginning of the season. As soon as the deciduous trees put on their leaves, they're in deep shade, and they love it. So plants do have a wide range. Some plants do. Most plants do. Some plants are so incredibly specific that you have to recreate the perfect growing conditions. And I'll show you one plant, Galax. Is anybody familiar with Galax? Galax is one of the only 2 plants I know in the Diapensaceae family. The other one is Shortia, which is one of the rarest plants in the world and only grows in the mountains of North Carolina. The common name is Oconee bells, and it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. And Galax, they used to collect the leaves every year and ship them all over the country to make Christmas wreaths from them because they're waxy, shiny like leaves. There's even a town not that far from me across the border in Virginia called, called Galax. And there will be a picture of my friend Evie Whitmore's garden where she has the most beautiful stand of Galax. And Evie Whitmore has a garden called Fort Courage in Penrose, North Carolina, and she's in her 80s, her and her husband Bruce, and they both are up every morning at the crack of dawn wheeling wheelbarrows full of limestone gravel to extend the paths and borders in their garden. They're going to live forever because their garden's never going to be finished. That's the trick to living forever. Just, you know, keep on doing stuff that never has an end to it. Trillium nivale, Trillium grandiflora, this is the most prevalent trillium. In the woods where I live are just covered with this plant. And trilliums take about 7 years from seed to produce a flowering plant. They're epigeal germinators, which means the first year they throw out a root radical, you don't see any above ground growth. And the second year they produce their cotyledons, and then they grow slowly year after year till in about 7 years you get a flowering sized plant. Well, the rhizome of a trillium has dormant buds that are hidden all along the rhizome, and it's real easy to snap off a piece of the rhizome and put it in the soil and grow new buds and snap them off. Some species grow more buds than others. Trillium cuneatum, which is the easiest to propagate, a little half-inch piece of rhizome can have 3 or 4 new plants on it in 1 year. So it's an easy plant to propagate, and it's a very easy plant to grow. Trillium Myrctum. A very easy plant to grow except for this one. And here you think, well, all plants in the same genus might be easy to grow. I mean, if one species in the genus is easy to grow, why is not another? But this has a completely different need than the typical Trillium. This is a plant, the painted Trillium, aptly named, likes to grow in peaty, acidy bogs. And I've tried to replicate the condition countless times, and I haven't successfully been able to do it. But it's nonetheless a lovely plant to encounter in woods. One of our native geraniums, Geranium maculatum, another fantastically easy to grow plant and to propagate. In fact, people who come to my workshop tomorrow are going to get a bloodroot, a trillium, and a geranium. And in about 4 or 5 years, the geranium rhizome can be that long. You can snap it into about 3 or 4 pieces, and the following year you'll have 3 or 4 new plants. Let it grow another year or two, snap it again. Also, these are real easy to grow from seed. The seeds germinate in a year, and you get a flowering size plant in 2 years. So what a great site, a hardy geranium with beautiful foliage and deep purple flowers. Native gingers out here? Sarum canadense? See, canadense is a specific epithet that Linnaeus used because at the time they laid out the original code of botanical nomenclature, there was no America. This was all considered Canada. So things like Aquilegia canadensis, Sarum canadense, et cetera, have the specific epithet canadense or canadensis. This is a wonderful ground cover. I mean, I have it carpeting the ground. It makes an impenetrable mat to weeds. You can use the root as a substitute for the tropical ginger in cooking. You get a little buzz from chewing the root if you're walking in the woods and you're tired and you pull up a little piece of root and chew it, get a little buzz and a little energy. It's a wonderful plant. Produces these really strange flowers. Anybody seen the flowers? They're kind of hidden under the leaves. They have these little star-like appendages, and they're pollinated by ants and slugs, and they're real easy to grow from seed. This is the evergreen counterpart. The evergreen ones used to be a sarum, like a Sarum europaeum, a Sarum arifolium, a Sarum virginica. This is a Sarum virginica, Sarum shuttleworthii. They're now in a genus of their own called Hexastylus. Our native bleeding hearts, and this is Dicendria eximia. It likes really good drainage, shaly soil. We have these naturally occurring areas in the woods called shale barrens. I wonder if you have shale barrens out here. Shale barren is at the top of a mountain where the conditions are brutal and it's pummeled by sun, wind, rain. I mean, only specific plants can survive. There's virtually no organic matter. I don't even want to use the word soil because there's a little bit of organic matter in the cracks between the little pulverized pieces of shale, and you'll see when I show you the picture of Viola pedata, the Würzwood violet, you'll get a good example of what the shale barren soil or lack of soil looks like. And there's species of plants growing in these shale barrens that don't occur anywhere else besides the Rocky Mountains. Eriogonums. I'm trying to think of the common name for eriogonums. Buckwheats. There's eriogonum species that grow there that don't grow anywhere else except for Colorado. So somehow they got here and the conditions are the same as they are at the 15,000-foot peaks of the Rockies. Jeffersonia diphylla. This is a plant that loves limestone. It grows on limestone cliffs, although it grows great in acid wood. So it's another one with this incredible range. But you find it natively in sweet soil areas. And yeah, that's a great indication when you're flying somewhere in the winter and you're going over these mountains or hollows or hollers, as we say, and you see conifers growing on one side of the mountain. And well, that's not to say that seeds didn't land on the other side of the mountain and that there's maybe not a few stragglers on that side of the mountain, but they chose where they wanted to grow. They thrive in specific locations. So that's a good clue. You know, gardening is not rocket science. Rocket scientist. It's observation, keen observation. Same thing with landscape design. I've ended up with some beautiful combinations in my garden. I have no background in landscape design or landscape architecture, but I noticed that this bloomed at the same time as this did. The color might look good with this, and the height, this would be a good foil for this. So it's 99% observation, and gardening with native plants is knowing where they grow naturally and just replicating those conditions. You could replicate virtually anything. Not 100% of the time, as witnessed by the problem I'm still having with Trillium undulatum, the painted Trillium. But when I grow up and have more time, I'll tackle that one. I love a challenge. So these are really cool plants, but they have very ephemeral flowers. Small white flowers about the size of a quarter, 6 petals. When a raindrop hits the petals, they fall off. So, I mean, this is not a plant that you're going to grow for the flowers. Maybe a plant that you want to grow for that beautiful foliage, and it makes almost like a shrub as it grows older and bigger and masses more. But the seed pods too. So there's another element of garden design. The seed pods, they're these tall drumstick appendages that have the coolest shape and a neat little lid like a sombrero that when the seeds are ripe, this little lid flips open and waits for a human or animal to walk by it and knock the seeds out. Same thing with Dodecatheon median. I think that might be in here, the shooting stars. It's a very ephemeral plant, but when it sets seed, it sticks around longer, and you have these ornamental seed pods, which the seeds, you don't have to be there the day the seeds ripen, like with Hellebores, because the flowers are not. You could go to sleep one night and have green seed pods, wake up the next morning, they're brown and the seeds are gone. That's why we put these little bags. And everybody that comes to the workshop tomorrow is going to get a seed collection bag and a method of closing the seed collection bag. And if this was my Hellebore workshop, I would all have you guess at this question, and somebody always gets the answer. We use these Tyvek mill-spun polyester bags to put over flower heads to collect the seed. It lasts forever. I mean, they're polyester. I mean, they just last forever. But they're drawstring bags, and the drawstrings were made out of cotton. So after a year or two, the cotton drawstrings disappeared, and we were left without a method to clamp the bag shut. So the bags were kind of useless. But one of my employees, we tried everything. One of my employees figured out the perfect way to close the bags up. Can anybody guess what that was? Somebody must have an idea. Zip ties, that's one answer I get. People, you're getting close. That's even closer. There it is, yes.
And I'm the novice.
We're all novices.
Oh, no.
A wooden clothespin. I mean, we tried dental floss and tie wraps and zip ties and everything like that. A wooden clothespin. And this was a long time ago before the internet, and I needed to get clothespins. We had these big, giant green books called Thomas Registers that you paid $175 for. You know the Thomas Register. And it listed every manufacturer of everything in the United States. Guess how many clothespin manufacturers there are in the United States? None. Where do you think all our clothespins come from?
China?
Who do you think the largest importer of clothespins into the United States is? Boy, you guys do have the answer. Walmart.
But are most of them plastic too?
Yeah, you don't want plastic.
I know, I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't even see plastic clothespins anymore. So I called my local Walmart store, number 1499 in Lewisburg, West Virginia. I know the manager, Alan S., and I said, Alan, I need a deal on clothespins. I need thousands of them. He said, Barry, you know, we're Walmart. We have everyday low prices. We don't give special deals. But they had $2.99 for a bag of 100 wooden clothespins. He said, I can have a pallet here tomorrow from our Harrisonburg warehouse for you. I said, will you deliver them? I was just messing with him at that point. I said, you know we don't deliver. So now I'm not just the king of Hellebores, but I have more clothespins than anybody else in the United States. Then we ran into another problem because the Hellebore stems are straight up like that. And no matter how tight we clamped the seed collection bag shut, seeds would fall out. So we would throw rocks, pick up rocks, and put rocks in the bag to arch the stems over. And believe it or not, in the mountains of West Virginia, we ran out of rocks. It's the challenges. I love it. So what do you think we used? Boy, you guys are sharp. Did everybody hear that? Marbles. Went to the Thomas Register to find the largest manufacturer in the United States. How many manufacturers of marbles do you think there are in the United States?
I don't know, we have one close by.
Do you really? Well, all right, you blew it here because at that point there was only 5, and guess where every single one was?
New Mexico?
West Virginia.
Oh, really?
So I called Marble King in Payton City, West Virginia, and I tried to trade the guy Hellebores for marbles. He didn't know what the hell a hellebore was. He said, I grow tomatoes. You got any tomatoes? I said, just the ones in my garden. And he said, but I can ship you 50-pound boxes of what we call floor sweepings, which are supposed to be nicked and dented, scratched. Everyone's perfect, little cat's eyes. I mean, they're beautiful. For $25 plus UPS. The UPS costs more than the marbles. And now up in the top floor of my barn, I have about 75 5-gallon buckets full of marbles. And when somebody accuses me of having lost my marbles, I take them up there. So now I'm not only the king of hellebores and the king of clothespins, I have more marbles than anybody else in the United States. Porteranthus is a really neat plant that they used to make ipecac from the root. You don't see ipecac anymore. I remember when I swallowed a quarter once when I was a little kid, my mother made me drink ipecac so I would vomit it up. Ipecac is an emetic, which makes you vomit. And this is a beautiful plant. It turns almost shrub-like. It'll get up about that tall. And for weeks, it's covered with these beautiful frilly white flowers. It used to be called Galenia trifoliata. Not, you don't have to be a genius to figure out why trifoliata, just like Tryfilum, the 3 leaves. And these beautiful wispy-like flowers, easy to grow from seed, easy to grow from cuttings. Sarracenias, I have 3 friends that seriously breed pitcher plants. And this is a carnivorous plant. This appendage here is filled with an acidy substance that it has pheromones that attract insects. When the insect is attracted, it falls into this tube and it spirals down and can't fly back out and falls into this acid-like substance which dissolves it, and the plant assimilates its nutrients from that acid-like substance. But it has beautiful flowers too. Lilium superbum, or as my employees like to say, super bum. And this is the Turks Cap Lily, another very easy lily to grow from seed or from bulb scales or rhizome division. It gets 6 feet tall. I had a colony of these up on top of the mountain of my farm in deep shade. And for years, I waited for them to flower, and they were beautiful, lush, green foliage, massive stand of them. They never flowered. Then one year, a lightning strike took out this maple tree, and all of a sudden, a portion of the colony was in the sun. So, duh, why didn't they flower? Because they didn't feel threatened. There was no need to perpetuate the species. They were doing just fine. But then all of a sudden their environment changed and they felt threatened. So that portion that was getting sun started flowering. So there we go. Without being rocket scientists, we take them out of that area and grow them in full sun, and they thrive and produce millions of seeds. Canada lily, Lilium canadense. This is how I discovered why all the pictures you see of Native Americans in the past, they were skinny, because this is Indian cucumber root. And it takes all day to collect a handful of that. And, you know, I can just picture the guy coming home to the teepee and showing the squaw, all right, here's dinner. That's all you got? Roots really do taste like cucumber, but why trash the plant when you could grow an organic cucumber from a vine and make pickles out of it? And it's a really neat plant. I love plants that have foliage that whirls around the stem. It produces, I can't say every year's growth like the rings of a tree, but every few years, as the plant matures, and I've seen them with about 5 whorls of foliage. And when they get mature, they produce a small yellow flower that eventually creates a blackberry in the fall color of one shade of yellow of the foliage and the deeper yellow of the flower, and then the blackberry on top is really attractive. Polygula postifolia, very unusual plant in the vetch family, milk vetch. This is a plant that I have a love-hate relationship with. This is somewhat evergreen plant, really neat, thick, supple foliage. Senecio aureus, they changed the name of it to, I can't remember, I think it starts with a K. I'm not sure, anybody know what that? Senecio is now a new genus. And the foliage is beautiful. It tends to grow in moister areas, but it'll grow anywhere, but it thrives in a moist area. And it produces these really neat yellow flowers. Problem is, it produces seed also. And the seed, Asteraceae seed, blows all over the place in the wind, so it may start coming up where you don't want it to come up, which is easy to pull up, but an easier thing to do if you remember and put it on your calendar to go look for the seed heads after they're done flowering, just cut them off. Another easy Latin lesson, May Anthem. In Latin, Mai is the month of May. Anthem, as we all know, is flower. So here's the Canada Mayflower, May Anthem canadense. Great ground cover, runs underground. It's in the Convalariaceae family, has a thin, slender rhizome, thread-like, grows underground, and every once in a while it shoots up another leaf. Single, solitary, philodendron-like leaves. And America's wildflower, I mentioned Virginia bluebells before. Another tip on garden design. This is a very ephemeral plant, and by ephemeral I mean something that comes up early, does its thing, and disappears, like spring beauties. Are there any spring beauties that grow out here? Claytonia? Claytonia, no. It's one of our first native wildflowers, produces these beautiful pink and white flowers, comes up, shows its flowers off, and not only do the flowers disappear, the whole plant disappears. Same thing with Virginia bluebells. Comes up very early. And people say, well, can I grow it in full sun? I don't have any shade. I said, well, of course, because at the time of year this is flowering and up, there's no leaves on the trees anyway, so sure you can grow it in full sun. It's in the Brangianaceae family, same family as Omphalodes, Pulmonaria, Comfrey. Most of the plants in the family produce blue flowers. And when they're gone, you have a bare spot in your garden. So I always say, well, plant these with Christmas ferns, which I think are native out here, Polystichum acrostichoides, which is considered an evergreen fern. It's probably the most indestructible fern on the planet. And it's considered an evergreen fern, but as we all know, the only thing that's evergreen truly is plastic and silk. There's nothing. I mean, even rhododendrons and pine trees lose their needles and turn yellow. And well, the Christmas fern, which is evergreen all winter, by the time spring rolls around after the snow and sleet and ice and brutal temperatures, it's looking a little tattered. And when the fronds come out, they kind of hide the old fronds as the old fronds deteriorate into another layer of organic matter and rich humus in your garden. So what I suggest is interplant the Christmas ferns with the Virginia bluebells. Cut the foliage back. Is this too much work for you? No. I mean, gardening is supposed to be good exercise. Cut the fronds off at the end of the winter before the Virginia bluebells come up to give the Virginia bluebells room. When the Virginia bluebells are done flowering and starting to disappear, the timing is perfect for the fronds to unfurl on the Christmas ferns, and they fill in that bare space. It's kind of like that picture, everybody's seen that time-lapse photography of the desert, which is barren, and then it rains, and we see all these plants coming. Well, you can orchestrate that kind of thing in your own garden. Just pay attention, make notes. What color is this? When does it bloom? How much room does it take up? Garden designers get pissed off me, landscape architects especially, because in one of my emails I wrote about how seeds had to be, you don't have to hire a landscape architect, you can do it yourself. I got a couple irate emails back from customers or friends that were landscape architects. So you can please some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. Who said that? I think you're right. I mean, you know, there's some controversy about that, but I've always quoted Abraham Lincoln on that one. And it's true. I mentioned Evie Whitmore before in her garden in Penrose, North Carolina, in her 80s with the wheelbarrows of granite, limestone grit for the past. She even has Mediterranean plants growing in beds with dehumidifiers running. I mean, that's how fanatic she is. Nobody's ever seen a beautifuler stand of Galax than this. So now you can see the glossy, waxy leaves, how they were used in Christmas wreaths. They were just perfect. I don't know, all our Christmas wreaths probably come from China anymore anyway, and most of them are probably plastic. But does any garden centers around here do wreath making classes? Yeah?
Our garden club, we actually have an event every December where we make all our own homemade Christmas wreaths.
Do you use lycopodium?
Honestly, you'd have to ask.
Lycopodium is running cedar or ground pine. It's a very primitive plant.
Then no.
No? That?
Native stuff that gets trimmed
Right.
round about.
Do they use Galax?
Holly, we use, no.
Well, holly's a good substitute because it's got the waxy, thick cuticle that the Galax does that holds up and doesn't wilt. That's why Galax was used. But Galax was exported all over the United States and overseas also for Christmas wreath making. Aster purple dome, and as you can see by the scratch, most of my images are from slides. I built a library of 80,000 slides. So there's a scratch in the ectochrome that I developed myself in my basement many years ago. This is Aster purple dome. And if you ever get back east to the Delaware Valley, there's a plethora of gardens to visit, but the top two, I mean, the top one is a garden called Chanticleer, which is immediate Pennsylvania. I see some people shaking their heads, yes. I mean, Longwood's amazing with the fountains and the fireworks and the Victoria lilies that you could stand on, but Chanticleer is a magical, mystical, amazing, seems to have as big a budget as Longwood does, but their focus is on the plants, not the glitz and glamour. And it's an amazing garden. Another one is pardon me? This plant, how tall is it? I'll tell you all about it in a second. Another one is the Mount Cuba Center for Piedmont Plants, which is strictly native plants. And this was endowed by Pamela Copeland DuPont, who obviously had money. All the DuPonts have money. And while Longwood is a Pierre DuPont garden and Winter Terrace Samuel S. DuPont, or vice versa, I can't remember. But the Mount Cuba Center has incredible educational seminars and classes. And my friend Dick Leighty was the director for years until he retired recently. He was driving along Route 100 around Schwenksville, Pennsylvania, and he noticed in a population of acres of Aster novae Anglia, New England asters, which are about 5 or 6 feet tall, that along the edge there was a short variety of this same plant. Now, he thought to himself, most likely, maybe it's automotive fumes and lead that stunted the plants along the front of the border, but he still dug a few up and took them back and watched them, because we see all kinds of interesting anomalies in plants. Like there's an effect called fasciation where a stem, I've had it on primroses and lilies, where instead of a pencil thick stem, you had like a 2-inch wide flat stem with 5 times the flowers. Nobody quite understands the effect of fasciation. It's thought to be viral, but if it was viral, you'd expect it to be there forever, but most of the time the next year the plants are normal. So he watched this plant for a few years, and sure enough, it came back dwarf every year. Now, asters, Phlox paniculata, and certain other plants are very susceptible to problems like powdery mildew, downy mildew, especially worse in places like where I live, where there's such drastic differences between the daytime and nighttime temperatures, which produce a heavy film of condensation in the morning, and that water is a perfect bed for the spores of these mildews to germinate. So he watched this, and the cool thing about it, it formed like a little mound. And if you lifted it up, you could see that the lower leaves had the same ugly appearance, but the plant hid it. So you had this like dome that hid all the bad habits. So he named it Purple Dome, and it's become a very popular landscape plant, Aster Purple Dome. Flock stolonifer is another native plant that's easy to grow, is a great ground cover if you want to fill in an area fast without having an invasive plant, because it produces stolons. So you have your central plant that produces maybe 3 or 4 stolons every year, and at the tips of those stolons are a new little plantlet with adventitious roots. Adventitious roots are little nubs with cells that have totippancy, which means the ability to turn into anything that's needed, kind of like stem cells. And when it touches the ground, they produce regular roots, anchor themselves, and you have another plant that's going to produce 3 or 4 runners with new plants. Proliferation. And there's several different cultivars that have been named, white ones, purple ones. Typically the straight species is that magenta color. I always thought, remember we were talking before about why common names refer to different things, and sometimes we don't know what they mean. And I was under the illusion that toothwort, dentaria, I mean, isn't that a clue? Toothwort, dentaria, come on. I was always under the impression that toothwort referred to the, again, dentation. The foliage is dentate, right? See the dentate? But it's not. It is because the rhizome is heavily toothed. It has a real interesting rhizome, maybe about that long, that again you can snap into little pieces and end up with this really cool plant in the Brassicaceae family that gets covered with white flowers for a very long time. This is kind of confusing also because this is Dentaria diphylla. Why is it diphylla? There's 3 leaves at every axil. Where is that? Yeah, there's 2 leaves opposite instead of alternate, so it's diphylla. It could have been triphylla, but whoever named the plant named it diphylla, and we're kind of stuck with that. I disdain when people call this butterfly weed. Nobody should use that as a common name. How about we pledge now here tonight to call this butterfly plant, as opposed to buddleia, which is butterfly bush, which is an invasive alien plant, which is illegal in some parts of the West Coast. You grow buddleia here? Does it seed around? Well, on the West Coast, there again, it depends on where you're growing it. My biggest problems on my farm is Rosa multiflora. You have that out here too? You know how that got here? In the 50s, the U.S. Department of Agriculture imported that plant and gave it to farmers to produce living fences. You know, the wire fence manufacturers weren't very happy about that. Now none of us are happy about that because that plant didn't evolve here with the natural predators and checks and balances that nature has to keep things in check. It evolved in Japan where it's not a problem. Same thing with Perula lobata. Don't tell me you have that out here. Kudzu? No? It's coming. South, pardon me? Bradford pears are a no-no. How about Norway maples? Norway maples on the East Coast are displacing our sugar maples and soft maples. Well, it's not a problem. Lithoram's more of a problem up north. Actually, another noxious problem on my farm is a native plant. See, not all native plants are perfect either. There's a plant called Verbicina alternifolia. Asteraceae family, common name is stickweed or wingstem. You have that? It's a composite that gets about that tall, produces yellow, not very nice flowers. They're referred to as dicks, damn yellow composite, DYC. But this is Mother Nature. You know, I have pastures, and I live in the middle of the forest. And the land wasn't supposed to be pastured. Man cleared that, and the earth claim it and reforest it. So what happens? You have briars, rubus, blackberries, blueberries, sumacs, verbicina, the perennial weeds, then the locust trees, Robinia pseudoacacia. Does that grow out here? It's kind of an understory tree, black locust. Makes great fence, supposed to last 75 years in the ground without treatment. And then the locusts have a short lifespan, and then they get replaced with the maples, beeches, birches, hickories. So it's Mother Nature's succession, you know, starting out trying to reclaim it back from grasslands, because it wasn't meant to be prairies or grassland. It's the eastern deciduous forest. And this plant, common name is butterfly weed, but we're going to call it butterfly plant. Another common name for this plant is pleurisy root, because it's used medicinally to treat lung problems. Here's a plant that took 20 million years to get here, approximately. It's the only temperate member of the Ananaceae family. Family is breadfruit, guava. It's the pawpaw. And there's several species of Irasema, but the most prevalent one is Irasema Tryfilum. And these fruits are delicious. Has anybody ever eaten a pawpaw? Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, aren't they wonderful? They had to be super ripe. And they have these big brown seeds in them, which are very easy to grow. I made the mistake of planting a bed of the seeds, which germinated the next year, and I let them grow in that bed for 5 or 6 years. I almost needed a backhoe to get them out, because they have a taproot that goes all the way down to China. So if you're going to grow them in deep pots till you're ready to plant them. In the 30s, in the United States, there were 35 named varieties of pawpaws. Just like apples, you know, red delicious, gold delicious, stamen wine sap, et cetera, et cetera. There were 35 named varieties of pawpaws. My friend Neil Peterson started the Pawpaw Foundation. He's a retired statistician from the USDA. And his life's work now is going around to old home sites, farm sites, and old homesteads, trying to find these species again. And he's been successful. The last count was about a half a dozen. The most popular and easy one to find was something called overlease. My friend Mike McConkey owns a company called Edible Landscaping in Afton, Virginia, and Mike is grafting these onto rootstocks, pawpaw rootstocks. So they were selected just like apples, for taste, flavor, size, early fruiting, things like that. So they have 10 times the vitamin C of citrus, and they taste like a combination of vanilla pudding and bananas custard. I mean, it's a really interesting, unusual taste. You can use the pulp to make cupcakes and biscuits, and it's just amazing what you can do with them. And there's even a town in West Virginia named Pawpaw, and a town in Michigan named Pawpaw. Hypoxis hirsuta, and there's another specific epithet. There's more specific epithets in Latin to describe some kind of hairiness, like cilia, ciliata, than any other specific epithet that I could think of. And can you see the hairiness on that? That's why it's Hypoxis hirsuta. And this is a little dwarf member of the family, one of the only amaryllis plants that I know of that's native. And it produces these quarter-sized, beautiful little bright yellow, primrose yellow flowers off and on all summer. They'll seed around and make a beautiful, brighten up your sunny, front of your sunny border kind of plant. Another great ground cover that's easy to grow anywhere, Iris cristata, the crested iris. Is that native? Crested iris? There are several named varieties of that. And even if it didn't get smothered with lavender, blue, purple, pink, white flowers for weeks at a time, the foliage is thick and lush and chokes out any weeds. I'm using them on my farm on road banks as a road bank stabilization, and it's magnificent when it's in flower. And these little lobster tail-like rhizomes start climbing over each other, and they kind of weave into a mat that nothing can grow through. There it is.
Yeah, I love that.
This is a very cool plant. Some people confuse it with a bad plant. The bad plant is Cyperus esculenta. And I haven't figured this out, but in Latin, esculenta means edible. Lycopersicum esculenta is the tomato. I mean, you know, when you go and order a BLT, next time say, you know, order it in Latin, you know. Just say, hold the Lycopersicum esculenta, please. You never know, the waitress may just be a horticultural student and know what you're talking about. But there's something called a nutsedge. Is that a grow? Yeah. Okay. That's Cyperus esculenta. And all sedges are in that family. Well, that's nutgrass, and I've been told that it produces a seed head somewhat like this, but much smaller, not as ornamental, and it's hard to get rid of. But this is a totally different plant. It gets up about that tall. It normally grows in moist areas, but it does fine in average garden soil. It's got a great coarse texture in the garden, and it produces copious amounts of seed in these really cool mace-like seed heads. This is a plant that was named for Benjamin Franklin's best friend. Franklin wasn't as much of a gardener as Jefferson, but he still loved his plants. So they named this for his buddy Thomas Meehan, who was an early Philadelphia botanist. Meehan's mint is a common name, but don't be put off by the fact that it's in the Lamiaceae family. Not all mints are bad. Believe me, I have some bad mints that I'm still trying to get rid of. This has, well, Mehania cordata. Why cordata? Heart-shaped leaves, there you go. Gets covered with these Scutellaria-like trumpets in the early spring that last for weeks at a time, these pinkish blue lavender trumpets. It's a great ground cover for the deep shade. I always tell people this plant grows in the dark. Not glows in the dark, grows in the dark. We have several different sedums, and that's shale barrens there. Can you see the soil almost looks like gravel? Sedum ternatum. This plant grows on sandstone boulders, and when it's in flower, it looks like it snowed on boulders. Wonderful, easy ground cover. Camellium luteum is an interesting plant, the Liliaceae family, dioecious plant. Kind of hard to tell the males from the females. Boy, I can think of half a dozen jokes there. But I'm being good. There's the shale barrens. Can you see what I'm talking about when I say shale barrens? There's like virtually no organic matter there. And I understand that you have a couple species of Opuntia cactus growing here too. I show this plant to people and they say, wow, this really is not Arizona? And I saw a huge stand of this at Powell Gardens. I see a lot of people smiling. You've seen it too. They have it in the butterfly garden. And it's native here too. Zizia aurea. Well, we have 3 species of Zizia. How many do you have? At least one. Zizia aurea, Ziziapter, and I can't remember the third one anyway, but we have 3 species. And it just gets covered with these beautiful yellow flowers. It can be a little aggressive in a moist area, but in average garden soil, it's never a problem. It's never a problem in a moist area too, because if you have too much of it, just give it to a friend. And it's very easy to grow from seed. When I tell people it's easy to grow from seed, I have to qualify that, but it's perennial too from the root.
Don't you know about the saying, beware of gardeners bearing gifts?
I thought that was Greeks. Wasn't it? Roman. Was it Greeks? Greeks. The Trojan horse. Trojan horse, right. Yeah. We have several different kinds of trifoliums. Clovers. Now, I remember when I first discovered this very unique, unusual plant, I'd really be mind blown if somebody here grows this plant. This is a biennial vine in the Fumariaceae family. I was on a hike with Ken Carville, a retired botanist from West Virginia University, and all of a sudden, and he was in his late 70s, he was hard to keep up with. See, old botanists never die. And we got at the top of a mountain, and he was jumping up and down. I found it. I said, what'd you find? He said, Allegheny vine. And this is a biennial vine, like I said, in the Fumariaceae family with columbine-like foliage. See, Ranunculaceae and Fumariaceae are very close related families. And dicentral-like flowers that are pink, and it climbs 30 feet into a tree and just hangs down with thousands of these beautiful pink flowers. But it's biennial, so you got to keep your eye on it or it's easy to lose if you want to keep it going, collect seeds. This was almost my 15 minutes of fame, but not. I used to take my kids swimming in this, what we call the old swimming hole in Spring Creek. I live at the headwaters of Spring Creek. And I would deposit the kids in the creek and just climb on the cliffs above the creek. The water wasn't that deep. I'm a responsible parent. And they could swim real good anyway. So I discovered this plant with thalictrum-like foliage, and you probably have some species of thalictrum here, meadow ruse. Yeah, thalictrum, Ranunculaceae family. And it, in my head, it keyed out as a thalictrum, but with fragrant white flowers. And my mind is racing, Trillium Glickii. I'm going to have a plant named for me. I had to think in ahead. You know, somebody has to introduce it and name it in your honor or something like that. A newly discovered species, and let's face it, and we've been here for a couple hundred years, there aren't very many undiscovered species of plants. So we're not the pioneers anymore. So I couldn't wait to get home and look in the floor and make sure that I was right. And I called my friend Tom and said, hey, man, I just discovered a new species of thalictrum. And I described it to him, and he started laughing. He said, turn a page. But I said, well, no, all the 5 species of thalictrum are listed on page 692. He said, turn a page. And on the next page was a different genus in the same Ranunculaceae family, Trout Viteria, a monotypic genus, Trout Viteria caroliniensis, tassel rue. And I found one of the only colonies that are in West Virginia. And it's a very cool plant. And I grew it and produced it commercially and sold it for years, and then lost it, neglected it somehow. And I went back to that swimming hole and borrowed 24 more plants because it was a great colony, and I got it back in production. We were talking with Malia, is it? Yeah. Malia, about caryxes, and I said, well, do you know, she knew everyone I threw at her, except for Carex muskingamensis. And I finally got to the place where this plant is native to, the Muskingum River in Ohio. And this is the palm sedge, and they call it because it looks like little palm trees blowing in the wind. It's kind of tall. It likes and favors moist areas, but it'll grow fine in average garden soil, sun or shade. And this is the other one I was talking about. This used to be Carex fraseri. And it's kind of a hard plant to photograph, get a good picture of it. I do have a new one that I should have replaced this one with, but I've been too busy, on my Facebook page. And the comments were, oh man, that's the best looking Carex, or Pseumophilus. They changed it from Carex fraseri to Pseumophilus fraseri because of the way that the flower comes through a little corolla or tube. And it has 24-inch long, 1 to 2 inch wide strapping foliage, and these beautiful white flowers that are pretty much setting seed here in this picture, and the new foliage hasn't come out yet. So this is almost looking at its worst. It's setting up seed, the new foliage hasn't come out, the old foliage is kind of beat up, but it's a really incredible plant to grow. It makes a massive plant, almost looks like a wild spider plant. This is one of the very few native annuals that I know. Common name for this plant is Miami mist. I get where the mist comes from because this grows in creek bottoms, wide, long creek bottoms, where when it's in flower, it produces a mist like it's floating in the air 12 to 24 inches off the ground. Why it's Miami mist, I don't know, because we're further than Kansas to Miami. So, Phacelia persiae, easy to grow from seed, great annual plant. And if you don't like this plant here, you can eat it. One of the first things when I moved to West Virginia is the people that lived there, the local people, were very excited about us young hippies moving there, and they took us out in the woods, and well, I hope nobody saw the movie Deliverance, but they took us out in the woods to show us edible plants. And we have, for $2 a year, you can join the West Virginia Wild Food Society. It's run by a woman named Edeline Wood, who's in her 80s. And they have a foray, and I still don't understand this, they have a foray every September, but the coolest stuff to eat is in the early spring. I just found a bunch of morels this year. They grow out here? Yeah. This is Saxifragum micranthodifolia. I don't know what that specific epithet means. It's kind of a long, doesn't roll off the tip of your tongue specific epithet, micranthodifolia. But it's rock lettuce, and it's unmistakable. And no matter how old this plant is, it's not bitter. A lot of the early spring plants, like creasy greens, which are cresses, after a while they get tough and bitter. Things like, one of the healthiest things you could eat is stinging nettles. Do they grow out here? Urtica dioica. I just recently found out how they work and why they sting you. They produce these little, you know what an ampule is, a glass ampule with drugs in it? They produce these little ampule-like appendages, which are full of a irritating liquid. And when you come in contact with it, the slightest contact breaks that crystal glass-like structure, and the shards inject that irritating substance under your skin. But in the early spring, those appendages haven't developed yet, and supposedly it has 10 times the vitamins that spinach does. So it's a good plant to look for. Another saxifrage, Mitella diphylla, another saxifrage relative. And this is another Mount Cuba introduction. This is an alum root or coral bell, heuchera, or as my friend Dan would say, and Leek is smiling. Was anybody at Dan's talk in February? Dan Himes? Yeah. Dan and I traveled to England together in '92, and I tell everybody he was still mowing lawns then. Now he's the most successful multi-millionaire in the horticulture business. He's unstoppable. Plays a mean blues harmonica too. And he all started, Dan's whole trip to stardom started by what he called sport fishing. He would go sport fishing. And what Dan was talking about when he went sport fishing was he would go to all these big production nurseries where they had 10,000 of the same plant. And he'd carefully look through their production and find something different. And once he was in a big production nursery where he found a heuchera that was variegated. And you know, he asked if he could have that, and they were glad to get rid of it because it wasn't normal. And Dan took it and named it Snowstorm. And as they say, the rest is history. He's introduced probably 50 different heucheras. But what made me think of Dan was the pronunciation. And people worry, am I pronouncing this right? Well, if we were, we would be calling Forsythias Forsythia because the guy's name was Forsyth. We would be calling heucheras Hoishiras because the guy's name was Hoisher. And hostas would be hostas. So, you know, we've kind of been pronouncing things wrong. Clematis, clematis, potato, patata, tomato, tomato, who gives a damn? But this is one of Mount Cuba's early introductions. This is probably the first, well, not the first named heuchera. One of the first named heucheras came from Alan Bloom at Bressingham Gardens in England. And it was called Oakington Jewel, and it was introduced in the 20s. That's the first heuchera. This may be the second, and it was introduced by Mount Cuba, and it's heuchera garnet. It's still one of the best. And another, this is one of Dan's early TRL introductions. Now they're breeding TRLs with heucheras, and intergenerically, not just interspecifically, intergenerically crossing two plants of the same, of different genera, and coming up with heucherellus. This is another one of those cool plants with whirling foliage around the stems. And not only, this plant has everything going for it. Not only does it have these icy white flowers, but it's got the whirling foliage. And the whirling foliage is a beautiful grayish olive color. This is Veronicastrum virginicum. Now, they used to call this Veronica. This used to be a Veronica, and there's many species of Veronica. But they discovered something about the floral structure, and they may have found the earlier herbarium specimens, so it became a new genus, Veronicastrum. I mentioned Aquilegias before, and these are growing on limestone cliffs. Our columbine, do you have this out here? This columbine, see, it's Aquilegia canadensis. Real easy to grow from seed. This plant grows in muck. I mean, this is a very sexy plant. The common name is false green hellebore. It has absolutely nothing to do with the genus Hellebores. I have no idea why they started calling it by that name. They called it by that name before hellebores were even imported into the United States, but it's a member of the Liliaceae family, Veratrum viride. There's a species in California, Veratrum californica, and there's three European species, Nigra, alba, and Lobelianum. And it produces a massive plant that gets about this tall. And the wetter and muckier it is, the more lush the foliage is. I mean, it's a massive plant, but it grows fine in average garden soil. There's the violet potato, and there's a perfect example of shale barren foliage. If you plant this plant in a rich, irrigated, watered bed, it will rot. If you plant it in the gravel in your driveway, it will thrive.
So is that shale native, or is that?
No, that's native. That's a shale barren. That's in situ. That's growing where it chose to grow.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not from the coal mining.
No, how'd you know about one of our, most embarrassing secrets? It's not a secret. Mountaintop removal. Don't get me started. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I just didn't know if that's what.
No, that's a naturally occurring shale barren where the opuntia cactus grows, the areogonums I spoke about before grow, and this is the bird's foot violet, and violet pedata, bird's foot. I mean, because the foliage resembles the shape of a bird's foot. There's Joe Pye. And if these are growing in a wet area, they'll get 9 feet tall. Spigelia marylandica, and this will grow fine out here. And this is a great hummingbird plant if anybody likes hummingbirds. And it's a member of the Loganiaceae family. And the only other plant that I know in the Loganiaceae family is the buddleia that we spoke about before. But it produces interesting trumpets with yellow centers, recurved petals. It's very easy to grow from seed. It's impossible to grow from cuttings. They just sit there and never root. But it's very easy to grow, and a plant will flower from seed in 2 or 3 years. And left to their own, they'll make a beautiful colony, and they always garner comments in the garden when people walk by them. Well, there's the doll's eyes that I spoke about, Actia pachypoda. Pachypoda in Latin means thick foot, and that refers to this red pedicel that the fruit sits on. Now here's a plant that has fragrant white flowers in the early spring, great divided foliage all summer, and all spring, summer, and fall you'll watch these greenish berries expand and turn a beautiful alabaster white with a little black dot on the tip, and there you have your doll's eyes. Now I collected these seeds one year, the first time I grew this from seed, in September. And it was almost magical because I had a 288 cell tray and I had 288 seeds. I swear to you. I put 1 seed in each cell, and when I got to the last cell, I had no more seeds. I don't know how that happened. I'm not lying or exaggerating. May lightning strike me. No, really, I had 288 seeds. And I learned from my friend Norm Dino, who published his own book called Seed Germination Theory and Practice, and is still the best work ever done on seed germination. And Norm, even before the internet, used to send me dot matrix chapters printed out with a 9-pin dot matrix printer of his book before he even published it. Because I was having problem with Aquilegia seeds germinating once, and I had them inside under lights waiting for them to germinate, and 2 years went by and they wouldn't germinate. And I said to Norm, my Aquilegia seeds won't germinate. He said, well, Aquilegia seeds need oscillating temperatures. And I've come to find out that most seeds need oscillating temperatures. They need to freeze and thaw. They need to know that they're outside in nature, and it's cold, it's warm, it's cold, it's warm. Now it's just warm, it's time to germinate. So I've been, ever since that time, been putting seeds outside in flats. I mean, and my woods are covered with seed trays, and I never throw anything away. I even have my phone bills from 1972. Somebody told me they have a television show now about people like me. They said, this is a disease, man, you're sick. I said, well, I could be worse. I could be a serial killer. I mean, I'd rather be a hoarder than a serial killer. So, following spring, 0% germination. 288 cells. I thought that some critter came and took the seeds out of every little cell and ate it, because that's happened before also. But I poked around and the seeds were still there. And I knew the seeds were ripe because the plant was dead and the berries were all shriveled up, and it was a pain in the ass to get the seeds out of the seed heads, because it was that in-between time. When the seeds are pulpy and fresh, they wash right out in water in a colander, and when the seed heads are really dry, they just crinkle out of the seed heads, you know, they turn to dust. But this was like that in-between time where it was kind of sticky, it wasn't hard yet, it wasn't pulpy, so it was a pain in the ass, but I got all the seeds out, they were fresh, they were finished evolving, they had mature embryos in there, I was sure of it. 0% germination. So I just left the seed tray in the woods. The following year, 288 little plants. They needed that, they had that double dormancy. They needed to freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw. So the following year when I collected the seeds, put them in moist vermiculite in the refrigerator, not the freezer. I put them in the refrigerator for 6 weeks, got them cold, brought them out for 6 weeks, put them back in for 6 weeks, brought them out for 6 weeks, so 100% germination. So there's how you can fool Mother Nature. I threw these in because these are easy to grow in every state of the United States. These are Louisiana irises. And Louisiana irises are a 5-species cross between Iris giganticerula, brevicollis, nelsoni, hexagona, and fulva. And each one of those species of iris brings a different color and habit to these plants. These are where daylilies were 50 years ago. They're just starting to get popular and named. They're basically water-loving plants that do fine in average garden soil. The wetter they are, the more aggressive they are, and they can really produce a lot of new plants. But they are beautiful, and each one of those species brings a different color and different habit to the group. There's a book written by a guy who's big in the Louisiana Iris Society, so it's a really fun plant to grow. And this is my marker plant because I have to prepare you. In a couple slides, you'll see an image of my mentor. And I don't want you to confuse him with and I hesitate to use the word popular, political figure that has since been removed. He couldn't be more opposite. Or a lot of people think he's identical. You'll understand when we get there. This is a fantastic native ground cover. We're all sick of the Japanese pachysandra that's just so overused everywhere. I mean, every McDonald's is landscaped with Japanese pachysandra. It's aggressive, invasive, doesn't have very nice flowers. They're very inconsequential. This is the native pachysandra. It has fragrant white flowers, lush foliage. Now, here's a shot of, this is last year's foliage. And in the fall, the foliage explodes with a silvery coloration, and every plant has different patterns on it. It's just a magnificent, easy plant to grow. It's not aggressive. Here's your summer foliage, and here's what it looks like in the fall. Great ground cover. And that's the Trillium cuneatum that I'm going to give you if you give me a 5-star review at Garden Writers. But I don't want you to do it just for the Trillium. If you got a problem and you didn't think I was any good, I want to hear from you. I'll still give you a Trillium. You don't have to give me the review. But I'm always looking for ways to do better. My mentor. No, that's not George Bush. And what was his... Right. And there's a reason that I'm showing you this, because after a hard day at the office or getting abused by people at Walmart or something, you know, you feel like hell, you go home and you get out into your garden, you stick your hands in the soil and you ground out all that negative energy, and you don't worry about anything anymore at that point. And that's all she wrote, kids. So, thank you.